What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the TCL 4X 5G and the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G. Now, before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to hit that subscribe button. And if you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, I will be linking to several other videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the TCL 4X 5G, we're getting a 6.52-inch LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 320, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. With the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, we're getting a 6.5-inch 120Hz Super AMOLED display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 405, and an aspect ratio of 20:9 as well. So on one hand, the TCL 4X 5G definitely doesn't have a bad display for what it is. In fact, for only having a 720p resolution, it actually does look pretty good. In addition to this, the colors are definitely bright and bold and everything, but that being said, the A53 5G is pretty much just better in every way. First of all, with a Super AMOLED display versus a regular LCD, the colors are going to be brighter and bolder, and the viewing angles with the A53 5G are quite a bit better. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, or really in any brighter setting, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is going to be quite a bit easier to see. And with a 1080p resolution, of course, the image is going to be a lot sharper, and with a 120Hz refresh rate versus a standard 60Hz, the movement on the screen with the A53 5G is going to be a little bit faster and smoother. So if you're doing something like watching videos, playing games, or really just using the phone in general, you will get a better experience with the A53 5G, and the phone is also going to feel a little bit more premium to use. So in general, I would say if you're not really going to be on your phone all the time, and you're not consuming a lot of content, maybe you're just watching an occasional video every now and then browsing the web, using social media, stuff like that, but nothing really too intense. In that case, I would say the TCL 4X 5G will be perfectly fine. I mean, it's not like the most amazing display or anything, but it is at least decent. But on the other hand, if you want the best display between the two, if you're really going to be on your phone a lot, doing stuff like watching videos, playing games, looking up photos, and you're really just more of a heavy user, in that case, just keep in mind, the display with the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is quite a bit better, and if you are really going to be on your phone a lot, it most likely will be worth it for you. Now when it comes to storage, the TCL 4X 5G is getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is getting 128GB with microSD card expansion as well. So clearly here, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G does have a pretty big advantage, having double the storage of the TCL 4X 5G. So if you're more of a power user, if you have a bunch of apps, especially games because those tend to take up quite a bit more space, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is definitely going to be a much better choice. But on the other hand, for the average user, as long as you're mindful of what you're putting on your phone and you're not really doing too much, with 64GB, the TCL 4X 5G is at least going to be acceptable. But again, if you're more of a heavy user, you might want to go with the A53 5G because when you have a lot of apps, 64GB will fill up pretty quickly. Now for security features, both phones have Face Unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners as well. With the TCL 4X 5G, it's right here on the back, and with the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, it's right here in the display. But starting with the TCL 4X 5G, let's go ahead and give them a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see there, they were both real fast and responsive. No issues at all. And again, remember, both phones do have Face Unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now for the camera setups, with the TCL 4X 5G, we got a water drop notch for the front-facing camera. This camera is 13 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with the 16 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra-wide camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. And keep in mind, even though there's no depth sensing camera here, portrait mode still works perfectly fine on this phone. With the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, we got a hole punch for the front-facing camera. This camera is 32 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 64 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera, a 5 megapixel macro camera, and a 5 megapixel depth sensing camera. So in general, as far as features go, both phones have pretty much everything, including an ultra-wide camera and a macro camera. So if you're taking a lot of photos and you want a wider variety of features, either phone will get the job done. That being said though, when it comes to quality, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G has a huge advantage because this phone does take much better photos. So keep in mind, if quality is really important to you, while the A53 5G is still not going to be nearly as good as a $1,400 flagship phone, for example, it is going to be quite a bit better than the TCL 4X 5G. In addition to this, the A53 5G can record videos in 4K in both the rear and front cameras, whereas with the TCL 4X 5G, this phone does max out at 1080p. So again, in general, if you're taking a lot of photos and that's really an important thing for you, then I probably would go with the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, because if you really are using the camera every day, I feel like in that case it will be worth it. But on the other hand, if you're just taking the occasional nice photo here and there, maybe for social media or something like that, the TCL 4X 5G, while not being quite as good in quality, is still going to get the job done. Now when it comes to RAM and processor, with the TCL 4X 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 480 5G processor. With the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the Samsung Exynos 1280. So on one hand, keep in mind, the TCL 4X 5G is not only not a slow phone, but for what it is, it's honestly really fast. I mean, keep in mind, this phone retails for about $150. I personally got it on sale for $80. Whereas with the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, depending on where you get it, the price of this phone can vary a little, but it retails for about $400. So at full price, the A53 5G is almost double the price. But that being said, while the A53 5G is definitely faster, it's not really that much faster, especially when you consider the difference in price. So in general, for more basic activities like web browsing, social media, stuff like that, if you're not really going to be on your phone all the time, I do think the TCL 4X 5G will be perfectly fine. But that being said, of course, if you do want the higher performing device between the two, the A53 5G will be the way to go. Now that being said, I did run Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both of these phones, and here are the scores I got. So again, as you can see here, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is technically faster, but honestly, again, when you consider the price difference, the TCL 4X 5G is really not that far behind. So again, the bottom line here is, if you do want the faster phone between the two, and that's really important to you, the A53 5G will be a better choice. But honestly, there's really not a whole lot this phone can do that the TCL 4X 5G can't do. It's just that with the A53 5G, you will get a slightly better experience. But honestly, if you're seriously a power user, if you're just going to be on your phone all day, maybe doing stuff like higher performance mobile gaming, for example, in that kind of situation, to be perfectly honest, you're probably going to want a phone even faster than the A53 5G anyway. So in general, again, if you're looking for a solid mid-range 5G phone for more basic activities, while the A53 5G is a faster phone, you're really not going to go wrong with either. Now for the batteries, the TCL 4X 5G has a 4500 mAh battery, and with the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery. So while the difference definitely isn't huge here, it's not like the TCL 4X 5G has a really small battery. It's definitely still there. So if you want the best battery life between the two, the A53 5G will be a better choice. In addition to this, with 25-watt fast charging, the charging speeds on the A53 5G are quite a bit better. So again, in general, if you want a phone with a better battery, and that's really a priority for you, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G will be a better choice. But if you just want something decent that works, the TCL 4X 5G will be perfectly fine. Now when it comes to the software, this is an area where the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G has a huge advantage. With this phone, we're not only getting Android 12, but with Samsung's software support, you can expect to get not only Android 13, but several other major updates as well. On the other hand, with the TCL 4X 5G, this phone has Android 11, and I don't even know if this phone's going to get Android 12, let alone Android 13 or any other major updates. So if having the latest software is important to you, then I would definitely go with the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G. In addition to this, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G does have NFC, whereas the TCL 4X 5G doesn't. So if you like to use tap and pay, then the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G will definitely have an advantage for you. And in case you're wondering, neither of these phones have wireless charging, so if that is a feature you want, definitely keep this in mind. Now another thing to keep in mind here is that with the TCL 4X 5G, we actually are getting a headphone jack. Actually, it's on this side. Whereas with the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, as you can see, this phone does not have a headphone jack. So if you have a normal pair of wired headphones, then you might want to go with the TCL 4X 5G. But that being said, if you do end up with the A53 5G and you want to use normal headphones, you can technically use an adapter, which I will be linking to in the video description. So in general, while it's kind of annoying if you have normal headphones, not having headphone jacks still isn't really the end of the world. But if you really do want a headphone jack, the TCL 4X 5G might be a better choice. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? Honestly, in pretty much every way, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is the better device. It has a much better display, more storage, a better camera that can record 4K videos, better battery life and better charging speeds, a newer software with better software support, and NFC. But that being said, on the other hand, keep in mind, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is pretty much double the price of the TCL 4X 5G, in fact, probably even more than that. So in general, if you want the best performing phone between the two, with the best features, best display, and pretty much best everything, then obviously the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is going to be a better choice. But on the other hand, if you're really just not a heavy user, and you just need something reliable that works, and maybe you don't want to spend a ton of money on a phone, then I do think the TCL 4X 5G, for what it is, does provide quite a bit of value for the money. And in that situation where you're not really going to be using your phone for anything crazy, you're not going to be on your phone all the time consuming all kinds of content and doing things that need more space and processing power, I do think the TCL 4X 5G is going to be a great choice for what it is, and is definitely still worth considering. But this concludes my comparison between the TCL 4X 5G and the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, I will be linking to several other videos about each of them in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.